Wait a second.
You're gonna cut it.
That's good. Hi guys. Wait, I think you're crooked. How are we? It's been a while. Everybody get comfortable because we're gonna be here a minute. Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. If you've not been here, my name is Manye. Today we're going to be talking about books that I've read during this year of 2022. So some books I kept out that I read for school, but these are the fun books that I read for leisure. I write my book reviews as I go on my little notes. So yeah, I'm very thorough, okay? And I'm okay with that. So let's get into it. All right. I hope we're all comfortable and ready to go because I'm ready to talk, okay? Book number 1. So the first book I read was Dry by Neil Shusterman. And this was a post-apocalyptic book about all of the water drying up from the earth and everyone's fighting to survive. So everyone's fighting for water bottles in the store. Obviously people are getting aggressive. It shows what happens when, like, to the body when we don't have water. So people were going crazy because at some point you become like, you know, like when you're starved, you are aggressive to get the food that you want. It's the same thing with water. And I personally haven't really thought about that as a plot, so I thought that was really interesting, and it was unique. I liked the unique storyline for that. As for the characters were likable. I thought that he did a good job of explaining it. I just felt like something was missing. I couldn't really explain it, but I gave it a 7 out of 10 at the time, and I would definitely say it is the same after thinking about it for a while. It was good. It had me immersed right from the beginning, but it did feel like at the end it was a little bit rushed. So if you want to maybe get out of a reading slump, that's a good one to go with because, you know, it hooks you in right off the bat. So moving on to book number 2. So this book, guys, I was so excited for this book. It is called Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. Love Neil Gaiman. I love his writing. I love the way he forms his sentences. It's like it comes alive. I literally love it. But I didn't love this book. I gave this book a 4 out of 10. To give you a very brief summary, there is a man who is living his regular life. He's not having the best time, you know, he's dating someone he's not super compatible with, and then he meets this girl on the street and he decides to take care of her. So he takes her home and he's taking care of her. The girlfriend gets mad, and then the little girl changes his life. So because he interacts with her, she's from a different world, and once he interacted with her, he opened a door to the other world. So it's based in London, and there's an underground. So there's a London and then the London underground, and it's this whole world. It's dark and gloomy and everything bad pretty much, and there are weird creatures and people can get trapped there, and this man is trying to protect this girl, but he's also trying to get back to the real London. The plot sounded so good and I was really intrigued by it, and it was a solid plot. Like, I was intrigued by the idea, but it was so slow. And it felt like parts that should have been included into the story weren't. It felt like it was pointless to read. I feel bad saying that because I love Neil Gaiman, but I didn't love it. Also, the illustrations. This book had the coolest illustrations. I wish I had it here with me, but I left it at my mom's house, and the illustrations were so amazing. And I'll try to put in the description who the illustrator was or in this video, but he did a great job, and that kept me turning the pages because I'm like, okay, there's a picture coming up, like, this is great. And it set the story. It really set it off. But the character that I loved was the hunter. Spoiler coming in a second. She did betray them, but I feel like she had her reasoning for it. Like, I personally I liked her. I'm just gonna say I liked her. So the next book I read was entitled Scythe or Skith. I don't really know how to pronounce it. Also by Neil Shusterman. My friend gave it to me because she saw I was reading dry, so I thought that was really nice. This book has you hooked from the start. It's a futuristic kind of book, and people have to be killed in order to keep, there's no death. They're immune. Okay, so they're immune from everything, immune from sickness. They can be healed. They die, but then they can come back from it. So death doesn't exist unless you're killed by a certain group of people. So this is a series, by the way, so this is only the first book. I just didn't read the second yet. Certain people that have really good hearts are hired or trained to become a scythe. I'm pretty sure that's why it's called scythes, because they're called scythes. I haven't read it in a while, but they're hired to become the killers. So it's confusing because how are they so good and they're hired for a job like this, but it's so that they don't get the big head and like start murdering people like crazy. The two main characters are competing against each other to become a scythe, because once you do, your family is immune from death. And although they wanted to fight against it, there were a lot of pros involved as well. So of course they were fighting against it, and as it goes, they start to fall in love with each other, but it's very subtle, and I appreciate that in this book because it's not based on the romance. What else did I say? The author did a good job of bringing this concept to life, even with the little details, like torture is torture in the past society. Like they don't know how to pronounce certain words. And it's crazy how they see the past, which is what the world we're living in now. So I thought that was a super cool concept, and the plot twists and the truths and the deaths, it was a great book. So I gave it a 9 out of 10. This one was a good one. Okay, moving on to book number 4. This one was entitled Don't You Forget About Me by Mahari McFarlane. This was a romance book. I think one of my friends read one of her books and she liked her. So I picked up this one when we went to the library together, and I did not really like it. I gave it a 5 out of 10. Honestly, like, I barely remember the plot of this book, and that's how I feel like I determine whether or not it's good. Like, did it stick out in my mind or not? I wrote it just felt very bland, and I said I forgot what the book was about, and this was right after I read it, mind you. But what happened was there was an old fling from high school that was rekindled later, in the later years, and the girl ended up being hired at a bar, and the guy from high school owned the bar, of course, right? But whenever you read romances, you kind of have to expect them to be a little bit corny, so I kind of went into that expecting that, so that's not really what bothered me. The characters weren't likable that much. Like, I didn't feel drawn or attached to any of them. I will say I appreciated that they did talk about some tough issues that need to be talked about, and I thought that was a really good mix into the plot, and I honestly feel like they could have taken more time to like intertwine that into the plot. Okay, moving on. What book are we on? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Book number 5, guys. Let's see. I put in all caps this book. So this is Book Lovers by Emily Henry, a very popular writer these days. She wrote Beach Read, if you haven't read that, and People We Meet on Vacation. You know which one I'm talking about. It's orange. Wait, so it's Beach Read. Whatever. This book is blue, okay? I like this more than Beach Read, and I like Beach Read a lot, so. She took so much time to build up these characters, and it shows because even the side characters had so much personality and they added so much to the story. Like, no side character was useless, and I think that's why this book was so good. So this is about an older sister, a little sister, and they take a trip to a small town, and they live in New York, and you'd think she's gonna meet someone in the town, but someone from her job in New York actually ends up coming to the town at the same time, and they don't like each other, and enemies to lovers. I love an enemies to lovers, okay? Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start with this book, so I'm not gonna ramble, I'm just gonna read what I wrote. So the main character was career driven, had a difficult time assessing her emotions, and she dealt with a lot of trauma, and so did the sister. Dealt with a lot of trauma too, but she had a husband and a family and kids, and she processed it a different way than the older sister, because the older sister threw herself into her work, and you know, the little sister threw herself into her relationships. It was really interesting to me because I like that Emily Henry took the time to show that the older sister was having a hard time being a sister and not like a people pleaser, a people pleasing sister, because all she wanted to do was make her sister feel comfortable and make her feel safe. And although that's great, the younger sister, Libby, I think was her name, she didn't want another parent. I like that we could see their development, not only the relationship. So the romance was great. The dynamic between the two of them were really good. But I would like to set the record straight. I predicted the ending, and I love when I do that. It's so fun. So, like that book, 9 out of 10. I keep that the same. Book number 6. Okay. This book was called Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. First of all, this book was amazing because the main character was, I think she was Korean, I'm not sure, but it really, I really enjoy reading about people, you know, from different backgrounds, because I feel like reading about them is the best way to like step into their world and seeing what they experienced. She did a great job of showing me what it was like to be an Asian girl and how she grew up with a mom that was so different than how we typically perceive an Asian mom to be. I thought that was really refreshing to give like a different perspective. This was a really sweet and youthful romance book. I was in my romance era. This was during the summer, so that's why there's so many romance books in a row. Sometimes I don't always want a steamy romance, and I know it's an unpopular opinion, okay, I get it, but sometimes I just want like a cute romance. It was a little annoying, I think, that they were texting for majority of the book. The idea was emergency contact because I think he got injured. Something happened where she found him, whatever, I don't remember, but if you read the summary, I haven't read this in a while, so she found him. They were like, okay, like you'll be my emergency contact, and then they ended up texting a lot, and that was cute, but I wanted, I think, more interactions in person, so I gave that one a 7 out of 10. I'm pretty sure that was the main reason for it. I didn't really write it down. All right, moving on to book number 7. This book was a part of the series Children of Blood and Bone, and this was the second book, Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. If you haven't read the first book, then this might be a little bit confusing, but I really recommend the first book. It's about, it's from multiple characters' perspectives, and there's magic, and they're trying to get it back, and people are killed, and it's just like it's a fantasy book, so it's all of the above, fantasy, romance, all of it. So this was the second book, so we all thought, I don't think I wrote his name down, but we thought one character, I'll put it in here, he was dead, but he was not. So usually I feel like you can guess when a character isn't really dead, but I thought he was gone. Like I thought we were done, moving on. When I saw his name for like a chapter, I was like, wait, this man is in the grave, okay? And I would say that's a spoiler, but it's like the first 10 pages of the book. Okay, so I said that the author, Tomi, did keep me really intrigued the whole time. I felt like I was really a part of the war that was going on between everyone in the kingdom and the people without their magic and the people getting their magic back. It just felt like you were right smack dab in the middle of it, and I really loved that. Some themes really did feel repetitive to the first book. I felt I couldn't come to love a lot of the characters because they all did things to really piss me off throughout the book the entire time. So I don't know, it was tough because their decisions made sense. Like they were logical decisions given their different pasts, but it was annoying. I personally was really pissed that they ruined one of my favorite relationships in this book. This might be a spoiler, so but I loved Zaylee and Rowan. I thought they were so cute. I thought that was a nice, refreshing change. It was another cliffhanger, so there's going to be another book. So this one was a series, but I was kind of getting annoyed at this point because, like I said before, it was a little bit repetitive. I think that's why I took out, like, I didn't make it a 10 out of 10 and made it a 9 out of 10. I think it was because of that. Could just be me. It was really good, and I know the next book's going to be good, but okay, this next book I'm really not going to talk about for long because I didn't really like it. I gave it a high rating though. Not high, but like higher than I thought. This book was entitled Mrs. March by Virginia Fito. It was about a rich woman who married a guy older than her. They met in college, and then she had a son with him, and she thought that there was like an infidelity going on between him and someone else, so she was on the hunt to figure it out. But then at the end, she started going crazy, and this is a spoiler, and I think from what I remember, she killed him. But she was going insane throughout the book. But it was really hard to tell at first because it didn't seem like she was going insane, but I guess that's the point. I thought that was a really interesting concept, and the ending was unexpected, which I also did like. I didn't like the characters. It took so long to get to the ending, and it was only like 200 pages, and it felt like it took 8 years to get through. It was called The Wedding Date, and this was a recommendation from my sister, who read it first, by Jasmine Gulroy. This was a romance book, and right from the start, it goes right into the romance. These two people, strangers, are stuck on an elevator together, and he invites this girl to, I think, his sister's wedding, one of his friends' wedding, whatever. And, you know, they obviously end up liking each other. I loved that the main character was Black. I loved that. And it just, again, like Emergency Contact, it puts you into the perspective of someone you might not understand. So I mean, I felt all of this, everything she was saying. My sister and I were talking about how at one point she was like, are there any Black people at this wedding? Like, do you have any Black friends, basically? And he was like, I didn't even think about that. And it's so interesting. Things like that were really cool to read because we think that all the time, but it's like some people really don't think that. So I thought little hints of things like that were really cool. It only talked about the romance, and personally I think romance books are 10 times better when they talk about the surrounding and then get into the romance. Also, this isn't like a long distance romance kind of book, so if you're into that, that's what it's about. This book was my favorite book that I've read all year. I will die on that hill, and I got it for $7 at one of the bookstores in the town that we moved to, and it is The Invisible Life of Addie Laurie. Give it a round of applause. Let's reference my notes. The author is V.E. Schwab, by the way. First 10 out of 10 this year, and my last. Okay, so I'll just read you what I have. I have so much to say, but wow. Just the language the author used alone was beautiful. The way word choices made sentences feel like they were living and breathing around me was insane. The plot itself was amazing. It's nothing like I've read before. Addie was a girl who was sad, and she didn't want to live a life that her family wanted her to live. So in a time that she was desperate, she prayed to a god after dark, which is, I guess, the devil. She was like, I don't want to marry this guy. I want to live a life of adventure and freedom and love and happiness without the pressure of living up to everyone's expectations. Interesting. And this is like in the 1700s. So it went back and forth to that day and age to the present. She prayed to a god after dark, and he cursed her. So she was invisible to everyone. So she'd meet someone, they'd leave the room, they'd come back. They wouldn't remember her anymore. It really showed the beauty of the present. You can see I like this book a lot because I wrote a lot about it. It talks about the pain of desperate decisions, the confusion of love and how it comes in many forms. This is a spoiler, so if you're gonna read it, skip. Okay, so I said she might not have romantically loved Henry the way that, he loved her, but she loved the lessons, the newness, the gift of feeling scene. And I thought that was a better ending than having her be in love with Henry. Yeah, she loved the feeling that she was human, even if it only lasted for a moment. Henry, because Henry was the only person that could remember her. So I thought what happened with Henry was also interesting, and I kind of figured it was what I was thinking, because how was he the only one that could remember her? Like, it was too similar to her story. I loved, oh my gosh, I forgot about this. I loved that Henry was the one that was writing the book of her life. When I read that at the end, I started crying. So the fact that she chose to be with him so she could find her freedom, she loved her freedom so much that she was willing to sacrifice someone that she really cared about. I wish I could find, like, I don't think I highlighted anything. A breeze trickles through the air, carrying as much relief as a dryer vent, and everyone on the roof make exaggerated noises, letting out ohs and ahs that might be for the fireworks or simply the gust of air. Like, the next book I read was Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson, and that book I also have here. And this was a book that Haley Pham mentioned on her not story, like we're besties. Pham mentioned in one of her YouTube videos. I really enjoyed it. It was a fantasy book, so if you're not into fantasy, then maybe not, but it was a fantasy romance kind of thing. It was an amazing book. It was slow at first, but once we get into Kazi and Hasi, I don't know how to pronounce their names, but once they're stuck together and they have to go through the woods to try to get back to their homes, the book from there, I was obsessed. The tension made their connections deeper. The fact that they took the time to get to know I thought I saw someone. That they took the time to get to know one another was super, I just love that. I love when characters actually learn about each other and it's not just like, oh, they're in love with each other. They talked about his family and the things he was going through and the things she was going through, and how they both ultimately kind of wanted the same thing, even though they were fighting for different, kingdoms. I started recording this and the lighting was so bad and too bright, and it was something that I couldn't edit, so I'm re-filming this. So I apologize if I'm not as energetic. Okay, and finally, I read Little Woman by Louisa May Alcott. Anyways, I already watched the movie. I watched the movie before I read the book, I know, but sometimes it's just how it goes. I really enjoyed the movie. It was beautifully done, and I really enjoyed the book. So both of them are amazing. And I think that the book does a good job of obviously going into details. That's what books do. They're allowed to do that, and movies have to fit a lot into one film, 1 hour or two, if you will. And for example, Meg, in the movie, I didn't see the significance of her dream, like how she, Joe wanted to be a writer, Amy wanted to be the most famous painter ever, whatever, and Beth is so low-key, but she was content just taking care of the family. I didn't understand how much Meg valued money. The movie, I think they just show that she's like a nice person. The eldest sister, like, it shows, but they don't show how much her dream of wanting to be rich really meant to her. And I think that shows why her marrying someone poor was so significant. And I think you can see that way more in the book that you can in the movie. Take on that. But I gave this book a 10 out of 10. A perfect read in the winter. It makes you feel like, it feels like a hug. It really does. It feels like a hug. And with a hot cup of tea or coffee, it's a beautiful thing. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the books that I started but I did not finish. This is going to be brief. I started reading Jane Eyre. I started reading I'm Glad My Mom Died, and then I started The Invisible Life of Addie Laurie, and I didn't go back to it. I started Ocean at the End of the Lane. I read this book on my phone when I forget my book or when I'm out and I don't want to be on Instagram or whatever. And that's by Neil Gaiman, and I was really enjoying it. For my Christian girlies, for a devotional book, I started Gentle and Lowly. I forgot the author's name, but the book was so good, and it just talked about rather than like the works of Jesus, it talked about the heart of Jesus, because I feel like a lot of times people think like, oh, I need to be this way as a Christian and I need to be this way, and it's always about the works, it's never about the heart. So I thought that was really cool. And then for another devotional book, I started How to Hear God by Joyce Myers. I did not get far into that book either, but I'm excited to read that also. And that is it for today. Those are all of the books that I have read during 2022. Oh my gosh, almost said 2020. If you're looking for new books to read, here are some options, some opinions, some summaries, whatnot. If you guys have recommendations for me, you know what to do. Drop them in the comments. Let me know your thoughts if you read any of these books, because I personally have a great time hearing about it. So let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.